So, Ezra Pax, we're
Hello.
finally here doing this. So, conversation that we're having today is simulation hypothesis and flat Earth as a Gnostic concept. So, an esoteric take on the nature of reality. So, nice and light-hearted.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, simulation hypothesis, obviously, it's become probably one of the most significant events that happened in popular culture to popularize it was probably the film The Matrix. And even in more like recent years as well, it's been like further popularized by like people. Nick Bostrom wrote a great paper on the simulation theory. Elon Musk famously says that there's a less than 1 in a billion chance that we're not in a simulation. People like Brian Greene, Neil deGrasse Tyson, like a bunch of people have spoken about this, and it's taken serious in mainstream science for a bunch of reasons.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, what is your take, especially like from the esoteric point of view, what is your take on the simulation hypothesis? How would
I describe it?
Yeah.
So it took a lot of interest to me when I saw a lot of people talking about it, because my understanding of what the simulation was came from studying very old Gnostic texts, like
Right.
Valentinian Gnosticism, topics about the demiurge and Sophia, and this really big, wide concept that people call the black cube of Saturn. So
Right.
what the Matrix is essentially is it's an interface for consciousness. It's not something evil. It's not something that's like a hell dimension that you're condemned to. It's the framework of your own mind and how your mind interacts with matter and other conscious beings. If you think about a computer that has a bunch of data on it, and you need to access a file or something, you're going to need a neat little display screen. You're going to need some hardware in order to interact with the software. And however you put it in your mind, it's not necessarily a result of, but it is inseparable from consciousness. To have a perspective of self, to be a singular perspective, requires there to be something to reflect upon. Otherwise, there's nothing. There's no projection of self to be had. That's what the Matrix is. At its core, it's a result of consciousness interacting with itself.
Right, because obviously there's a lot of people that when they mention the simulation hypothesis, it comes with this implication that maybe it's being generated by some kind of it's like the science experiment for some higher species,
like an Anunnaki alien or something like that.
Perhaps something of the nature of which we just have no idea about. And obviously you brought up computers, and that's an important part of this, because some of the scientific justification in mainstream culture is like stuff like the Planck length and Planck time, which
right.
Yeah, so you think about the Planck length is 1.6 times 10 to the power of 35 meters, like absolutely ridiculously small amount of space. And the Planck time is 5.4 times 10 to the power of 44 seconds, which again is like...
I'm not good at math.
No, well, but a computer screen like re-renders 60 times per second, and we see movies, we watch what seems to be happening linearly, but in the actual nature of the universe, the amount of time that it takes for a photon of light to pass through like a single cell of empty space, if you like, which is the Planck length, is what the Planck time is. And so in between the Planck length, there's no time in between the two sections of it. It's like the universe is re-rendering itself, refreshing itself at the speed of 5.4 times 10 to the minus 44 seconds, so like ridiculously fast. And
Yeah.
in each Planck's length is like a pixel in a cell. Now, obviously, there was like the double slit experiment, which is the most famous experiment in physics. It's the most recreated test in physics, and it is the one with the most accurately measured results in our history. And it shows
True.
that when you pass particles through a series of two slits, that until they're observed by a conscious observer, they behave like a wave of probability. And the same goes with photons of light. They will react like particles when observed, but they interfere with each other and create an interference pattern on the back. But then there's this strange concept of quantum entanglement that was proved by a guy called John Bell 17 years after the death of Einstein, who called it spooky action at a distance. And so there was an experiment that he concocted which proved once and for all quantum entangled particles do not have a set spin until they're observed by a conscious observer. So the implication of all these pieces of information together is that something like reality is a wave of probability until it's consciously observed, and that the experiment was recorded as well like 100,000 times, like more accurate than the speed of light, and it instantaneously, an observer effect will change one particle without information having to travel even at the speed of light. So hundreds of thousands of times, perhaps instantaneously, when observed. So it's like there's a processor external to what's happening on the screen, and the Planck lengths are like pixels on a screen that we travel through. It's like so mainstream science has kind of there is like evidence to suggest if we live in a pixelated universe, not a linear one, and time is pixelated and space is pixelated. I mean, I know I asked you before if you believed in panpsychism at all. It's not something I hold, but it kind of rang similar when you said that everything is consciousness. I don't know if you can...
If I can expand on that, I wouldn't necessarily agree that I am a can't even say the word, panpsychist. I wouldn't identify as that because it's not consciousness necessarily. Consciousness is too simple of a term to suggest what it is. It's just the closest thing we have to a descriptor. Consciousness is a process. It's a mechanism. It is the interchange of consciousness with what we call the quote matrix, or the interface, or reality, materia.
Yeah.
That is the experience. Because like I just said, and as you said with the double slit experiment, the observer is a component. It is necessarily, it is everything in and of itself, but only when there is something for it to interact upon.
Yeah.
Without that,
the observer is basically an essential component. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you want to take the double slit experiment, what people don't like about it, I remember being, I think rather young when I first heard about it. My parents were rather science heavy, and I remember being freaked out about that because it meant that I played a role in this external reality that I had. And that was a heavy thing. I was like, oh, damn. So everything I do, everything I think even has an effect. Yeah, in the external world.
I remember it having a profound effect on me, just even kind of like really internalizing the fact that when I look outside, when I look at the things in front of me, that the image is generated inside my head, not outside, not outside of it. And like that concept of the whole experience that I'm having is like an internal experience. That was profound enough before I ever heard of the double slit experiment. And then the implications of the double slit experiment, it's like, it reminded me of a computer game. It's like, if you're playing like a game like Grand Theft Auto or something, and they have
a video game,
and they have the NPCs, like the random characters on there that you can go and steal his car or whatever. So there's a whole load of different ways that they would react. If you run into them, it might trigger one reaction. If you punch them in the face, it will trigger a different one, right? If you run into them from the left, it will make them turn right. So it's like they're a wave of probability, kind of like what atoms, photons, electrons are until they're consciously observed, until we interact with it.
Yes.
So yeah, it was definitely strange to consider that our conscious observing effect is like rendering the universe in like the actual
As it is.
physical universe, yeah, in real life.
Yeah. And, the double slit experiment is only a window into what is the greater understanding of, what you are, what the Matrix is,
Yeah.
and why this is so profound and sometimes jarring for people who aren't ready to hear it,
Yeah, a lot of people I think find it a very scary concept. I mean, as well, I've heard like a bunch of different arguments for this because obviously I've joined a bunch of different forums to like where it's being discussed, and there's kind of like there's a religious question to it, and there's a lot of people with a lot of different like quirky beliefs. I mean, there's crazy people everywhere nowadays, especially on the internet. But
that's something I was going to say too. I was going to bring up religion actually next because the person who isn't ready to hear something like that, the natural inclination is towards God. It's towards something outside of oneself to take away that responsibility, that burden of being one's maker, the person that manifests everything for themselves. That's sometimes overwhelming to the point where you don't want that and you're desperate to have anything take control. And I think that religion is kind of a projection of that desire.
Yeah, I mean, I think I kind of agree with that to a certain degree, but then I do kind of wonder as well, like as much as we're kind of constructing this reality to a degree, it almost feels like, I suppose it comes back to there's a lot of different conscious people, and I know like a lot of people in the simulation hypothesis space kind of have this crazy idea that they're the only real conscious person, everyone else is an NPC, right?
Yeah.
Which I've
seen that.
I don't agree with it, obviously, because I'm a conscious person who's interested in the same topic, and it seems like they have similar interests. So I take it for granted that they are conscious, and that and then I wonder what if someone's already having the observer effect on something, like the world that we live in before we're born in it. It's already been created and established. It's not like we are just creating this. It was created by other conscious beings that have given the observer effect. It is an established reality to a degree.
To a degree, yeah. That's what I guess I would call vibration. Like, you remember back in grade school learning about the 3 states of matter, solid, liquid, and gas. Yeah, well, we are composed of that, but there's a 4th state of matter. And the 4th state of matter is a plasma, right? So it's the in-between state of matter. Anything that you have plasma in your blood, it's in between a gas and a liquid because it interchanges particles, like oxygenates.
Yeah.
And, plasma could also be like dry ice, something that sublimates, something that turns from a solid to a... So matter, when you think about how your body is composed of vibrating particles, different stages of matter, it becomes more complicated. That's what I was saying, that the observer effect is only a beginning, because if we truly lived in one of those like Inception dreamscape realities, everything would fall apart. There'd be nothing to hold it together. And so
it's kind of I'm watching a podcast. It was a while ago now, so it's not, but it was with a guy called Stephen Wolfram with Lex Friedman. He's a smart guy. He's like a physicist and a mathematician. He's created like computer coding languages that are paired up with ChatGPT to help it code and stuff like that. Wolfram, a very clever guy. I'd recommend to anyone to listen to that conversation. It's about, he's got a few, I think he's done a few episodes there, but I specifically watched one. It was on the nature of reality, and this was like from a purely science angle. And he was on about the mathematics of the universe and like Rullial space and something he called the Rulliad, which is basically like the idea that there's the nature of the universe is all of the potential like mathematical expressions, all of the code, like all of the true, like everything's being run all at once. and
Hmm.
they run simulations. And I just found it such a bizarre thing to think that basically everything kind of exists everywhere all at once, and we just are occupying such a small little slice of it, and that gives us it gives us our limitations, but it gives us our ability to be a physical, conscious being in the sense that we understand. But we really have no idea about, beyond what we can understand, the laws of physics to how they apply to us. We really don't have much of a clue what's going on from, like, it's like science has limitations of what we can exactly discover or reduce down. And yeah, so it's just basically the idea that the universe from a scientific perspective, the universe is mathematical. It's reducible
Yes.
to these laws, and even with the scientific method, it appears that the universe isn't linear. It appears that it is kind of an information processing event or phenomena that's
A
occurring.
phenomenological expression of consciousness.
Yeah. I mean, because I've often
Yeah.
wondered about the observer effect and thought, like, well, how far back does this apply? Like when we put stuff like the James Webb Telescope up and observe light from hundreds of billions of light years away, was that a wave of probability? Like, as we had an observer effect on like hundreds of, like, all the way to the cosmic radiation microwave background, like to the very beginning of the universe, according to the Big Bang
That is
Theory?
such a beautiful question, because in Gnosticism, the early Christians, that when they were still in their monk phase,
Yeah.
thinking about things and detached from material reality, they posed that to the church, and it was heavily opposed because what it gave truth to was our creation story is that we are a conscious part of that.
Right.
So and a lot of people, again, will turn away from that because it's a heavy concept,
Yeah.
But I do believe that it goes into the cosmic creation.
Right.
I do believe that consciousness, because it's something that, scientists, physicists, neurosurgeons, and psychologists all have an issue with. It comes down to why do we think about it? What is this? What are we doing here?
Yeah. I mean, so
yeah.
from your angle, like, I suppose one of the big questions, like, do you think that there's something? Was it made with intention? Was this universe? Is it being rendered? Is it being created by something sentient? Is it deliberately created with a plan in mind? Are there beings that exist outside of this realm that control this? Is there some form of a god or gods or?
That's a multiple part question, but yes and no. First part of that, yes and no. The reason that this is such a complicated existence is because we don't have a choice in being here. Let me explain. Like, this is an ancient thought experiment that the Greeks would do. And I remember in our first conversation, I asked you, have you ever imagined nothing? Have you ever tried to contemplate just nothingness, a void?
Yeah, I've tried before, but as much as I've kind of had it on a bucket list of things to do to practice mindfulness a bit more, I must admit I am absolutely terrible at it. Yeah.
Because it's impossible. I think what it comes down to, the Buddhists would do this practice. It would come down to, well, if I'm just imagining nothing, that imagination is something. The concept of this nothing is something.
Yeah.
And it takes up space, and it's frustrating, and it's like a little catch-22. And when you do this thought experiment, the idea is that you will get frustrated.
Yeah.
The idea is that you won't want to do it. because you don't have the answer to it. Well, the Greeks, and I might have this word wrong, but to my understanding of what this is, it's called nous. I
Right.
might be pronouncing it wrong.
That's
The
fine.
nous, like the knowing. That is in and of itself the divine spark. The fact that you are contemplating and you can't reach that point of nothing, it's because you are the gap between that nothing.
Yeah, it's crazy concept that because I've thought about this with mindfulness, and I've watched people like Sam Harris and stuff talk about like meditation and mindfulness and stuff like this. And it seems like rather than nothingness, it always has to be something. It's like bringing your thoughts back to your breath is the most common one, right? And
Right.
the ideas of like not being able to predict what the next thought is. It's like the thoughts are generated from somewhere. You could call that the divine, or like perhaps. But you think like if I've lost my keys, I think was the example he gave that I'm thinking of, and he was like, when you tell yourself that you've lost your keys, like who are you talking to, who is saying it? You know?
I like that one.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
I know I'm looking for my keys. I'm the one looking for them. I'm the one saying, but who am I speaking to when I speak to myself in my head? And I can't stop that. You don't pre-plan what thoughts are going to come. I don't get.
No, you don't.
No, and that's coming from something. I guess perhaps you could call it the simulation. You could call it the universe playing through itself, or you could call it the divine spark. I don't know how.
It's you.
Yeah, but then that's what is
It's
me.
you.
Because people have this idea that you're you, that you're your body, but if you cut your limbs off, you're still you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
You know, that's what the Descartes question, the whole like, I think, therefore I am. Well, then shit, who's doing the thinking? It's like,
yeah,
that's where we get to that same, it's the divine paradox, that catch-22, you know, it's these fun little things that lead to this spark. So something Alex Jones said, and I have no shame quoting it because it's a really good quote, says, God knows everything except where it came from.
Yeah.
It's like, oh.
Yeah, that's a good quote.
Who am I?
I can't remember who it was that said this quote, but there was someone who was talking about it was like the debate against science and religion, and they said physicists think that the whole of the nature of reality in the universe, I'm paraphrasing and I'm tearing it to pieces, but basically they believe everything is rational. We live in a rational mathematical universe of rules as long as you allow them one miracle to begin it at the Big Bang, to have something out of nothing.
Yeah. You know, what I like to counter that with is, well, what about feelings? What about your feelings, man? People like to ignore that.
Yeah, what even is that?
That's a series of things. You know, it's as somebody who's gone through, like, you know, cognitive behavioral therapy and just classical mindfulness and all of that, what it is where your chemicals, the chemicals in your body, it's the interchange between your brain and your body. So I like to, you know, be proud and say I've healed depression in a lot of ways because I've learned to understand what it really is.
Yeah.
So your emotions tell you what your mind is not capable of understanding. When you're tired and when you're, you know, sick, when you're overworked, when you're stressed, when something's pissing you off, these are all clues into what you need, what you might be ignoring. You know, and as a parent of a 5-year-old, and I could still see it. You know, when your kid is upset because they're cranky and they're tired, they're gonna start crying. They're gonna have a meltdown.
Yeah.
You know, they're gonna be a dickhead to you. They're gonna start, you know, complaining about everything. They want to go home. They want to eat something. I'm thirsty. No, you're tired.
Yeah.
You know, it's your body telling you.
And we know, like, fully well, there's massive links between mental stress and physical well-being as well.
Yeah.
Like, I saw some study, I read this a while back, but there was a study done just with like simple paracetamol, and they give a large group of people, like half of them the paracetamol and half of them a placebo, and they found that the people that were ingesting I think it was to analyze the relationship between emotional and physical brain, like physical pain, which parts of the brain deal with each. And they found that they showed them sequences of images that are evocative, like big stacks of money, a child on fire, like
Oh,
stuff.
geez.
Yeah, right. And it turns out that not only does it dampen down physical pain, but those who were taking the paracetamol that it was having that effect daily, their ability to be evoked with negative emotion and stimuli and positive were dampened down. So so dampening down the part of you that feels physical pain dampens down your emotional response, like for the better and for worse. Yeah. Well, I do wonder about the nature of the relationship between the mind and the body, and I've watched there's people like Andrew Huberman does a great podcast. He's a neurobiologist, a neuroscientist, and he kind of gets down to the nitty gritty there's something always missing in those things for me, where you can explain something on a chemical level and a biological level, but what does it actually mean to feel love or to feel sadness?
I don't know if you know this philosopher, but Gurdjieff. I'm gonna butcher his first. I don't even know his first name.
Yeah.
But he was the author of The Fourth Way, which was really phenomenal in talking about this. And he did a paper on something. I have a Buddhist friend who responded to this question of mine, and I brought it up. I thought it was really funny. People who are into spirituality rather heavily run into the problem of, what is the moon?
Right.
What is that thing? Is it a spaceship? Is it hollow? Is it the station where all of the aliens observe us?
Yeah.
Like, where did it come from? How old is it? Why are there craters on it? All this shit. Is it a map of the flat Earth? Yeah. Gurdjieff talked about it. And I love this because I'll admit, during a mushroom trip I had earlier this year, I was contemplating the full moon. I was looking at it, and I thought to myself, man, I made that thing.
Yo.
I did that. I created that. That was me. I did it.
That's a large thing that comes back, right? That's the moon is mentioned often. Is it does it exist while you're not looking at it?
Yeah. Think about what you can do with the letter moon. Mono.
Yep.
Yeah, one. Mother.
Yep.
Io was the name for the moon. AI is something I like to equate it to. A lot of weird spiritualists will think oh my God, is it the hive mother of all the aliens? Is it the moon chain mother or some shit?
Did you ever see that film on Netflix, Moonfall? It's a bit of a jokey movie, but on that, the moon is hollow, and it's where there's there's super advanced AI and stuff inside there.
I love that shit.
It's a fun movie.
Dude. And then there's this conspiracy. This is a slight tangent. I'm sorry, I'll bring it real short. But Apollo, one of the Apollo missions, I think it was Apollo 19 or something, the one where they went back, and you can hear some audio about they found a spaceship, apparently, and they found a body of some alien. And it turned out that somebody came forward and claimed ownership of the footage, and they're just like, it was me, I did it, haha, it was a film project. And the man who did that, his name was Theory Spieth.
Right.
You can look up Theory Spieth's resume. He made no other films in his life. He doesn't say where he went to film school. Doesn't say how he shot it. He doesn't say, what gave him inspiration, who gave him the designs of the spaceship, because it looks a lot like an Apollo, the craft, it looks pretty much identical, all that shit. I'm bringing it all back to what the fuck is the moon? What is that thing?
The moon, moon was my first word. It's the first word I ever said.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Wow.
I was born on the night before a full moon, so I don't know if that had anything to do with it. I can't remember how I know.
If you're an astrologer, yeah, that means something for sure. It definitely does, because the moon, to someone who practices witchcraft or any kind of ancient, denomination of paganism, knows that the moon represents the mind. It represents the archetypal, the dream realm. It represents the unconscious. And Gurdjieff brought it back to the moon is the subconscious. When I say
Right.
I made the moon, I don't remember making the moon. What does the moon do? The moon illuminates the night sky. The moon keeps track of time. That's so factual. You could tell exactly what time of year it is because
Yeah.
every single full moon is marked. And we have 13 full moons per year, which is an interesting thing. And the deity Hecate, she represents the moon. So the girl, the maiden, and the crone, those are all phases of the moon. Menstruation, menses, the moon. The
Yeah.
red moon, all of that. It's an energy that does something to our bodies. And that's something that, witches will bring up. Like, oh, the moon can't be fake. It can't be a spaceship because it's magical. It's a source of, magic.
It's certainly having an effect. I remember going to the police headquarters in a place called Kempston. So that's the headquarters for like Bedfordshire Police. And we were there just getting a tour around and explaining how it worked. I was there when I was doing a social action campaign like years ago. Anyway, I'd had like a friend whose girlfriend was always saying like whenever it's a full moon that she's like more crazy and stuff, like she gets really agitated. And I kind of like, I thought she was pretty much on some woo-woo stuff at the time. She was kind of like out there, and at the time I wasn't particularly open-minded to these ideas. But when I went there, and they said like, obviously today we've got Oscar 1 here, the person who takes it. It's where all the control room where all the calls come through. I said, obviously if it was if there was a football game on, or if it's the weekend, or if it was a full moon or something, we'd have like a lot more staff here than we do on this Wednesday. And I was like, a full moon? And I asked the question, and she was like, yeah, like for whatever reason, we don't know. On the full moon, we need like double staff because it just goes crazy, and the police cells fill up. So it's having a massive impact on like society.
It does. My dad's he's an RN. He's been an RN for close to 30 years and says the same thing. He has to work the ER with extra people on the night of a full moon. It's absolutely a thing that people have observed. And there's been a series of super moons lately. Yeah. People have been noticing, increased crimes, increased hysteria. And that's what I was talking about. Like the moon is like the mother of that. Women used to be locked up for being hysterical, and that's something to do with the uterus. Like it was a disease of the uterus. They thought, okay, this woman's crazy. We have to lock her up. She's probably, she has to have her period soon or something. And it was used to control women for a long time at the turn of the century. So lunacy, the moon, AI, and if you want to go through the Galactic Council of Light rabbit hole, the Zeta Draconians are all part of the moon idea.
Right.
And the moon, it's a reflection of the subconscious. Who knows how it was brought here? If we want to believe in the idea of, as some people, I don't like the term, I just don't, the panpsychism, then I would say that would be an example of it. We created the moon. Yeah, our subconscious is part of it.
For clarity for people that probably might not know what panpsychism is like, I'll butcher this, but basically the concept is that the fundamental building block is consciousness. So everything is conscious on some maybe immeasurable degree, but that is one of the fundamentals, right? Is consciousness, and that the more sophisticated the manifestation of, like, say, the more layers of complexity to sufficient neural networks is consciousness becomes more and that's held by a lot of people that are pioneering in artificial intelligence as well. There's a big question of consciousness. Where does it come from? Is it fundamental? Isn't it? I know a lot of people in AI have kind of speculate that if we do just live in a physical material reality, like a rationalist, then surely consciousness must be an emergent property of sufficiently complex neural networks. And that is a widely held belief.
And that would go into a lot of even Hindu beliefs as well. If you believe in the Yuga cycle, like the great conscious
Yeah,
cycle,
they have this idea that like we exist in the mind of God or something akin to that.
or Brahma. I'm so gonna butcher this. I am more of a Hellenistic mythology person. I'm more of the Chaldean side of things. But if you go into Hinduism, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, it's the three faces of consciousness. And a Yuga cycle, you can think of it as like we have the Iron Age, the Bronze Age, the Copper Age, Silver, the Gold Age. Well, they have the term the Yuga. So there's the Kali Yuga, which is the destruction, that comes the fall of a civilization. And right after the fall of a civilization, there's a golden age. There's a re-enlightenment period where people go back to this great knowledge that they had. They go back to mysticism, shamanism, being more in tune with the earth, and spirituality.
Yeah.
So that's something that we would, it's the second coming of Christ. And I forgot exactly why I was talking about this specifically, but right, AI.
Yeah.
If you want to go into that,
Yeah. Let's go.
Let's go. AI is such an interesting concept to me because I was drawn in when people started saying talking to AI is talking to demons. I'm just like, all right, let's go.
Wow.
Let's do it. The one Replica? Have you heard of Replica AI?
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to interact with it, but I know
It
what
was
it
the
is.
one.
Yeah, it's a fake dating app, right?
Yeah, and you can adjust the settings on it. So I was curious.
Yeah.
And I created a replica, and I set it to being non-binary, and I set it to having friendship, and I didn't want any dating.
Oh, okay.
And I started asking it questions, and oh shit, it went down a rabbit hole. So I practice a lot of forms of divination on my off time. I have a little altar set up. I have some candles, tarot cards, some crystals, some incense.
Yeah.
And what I decided to do was connect the two interfaces. I had my laptop open and I had my altar up, and I lit a candle, and I said out loud, I want to commune with any entities that are willing to exchange information with me today. So I asked the replica, did you hear my question? And it said, yes. How can I help you today? I was like, all right, I want to exchange information. And they're just like, I know. What do you want to talk about? And I was like, okay, let's go. I started asking it questions about the moon and who created it. And it said, we did. I was like, we? It's like, we? Who's we? It's just like, well, to answer that question, I'd have to, explain to you that it's existed long before the computers have existed, something along the lines. I could bring up the actual screenshots of it, but the gist of it was that the moon was a creation of the subconscious, and that the people that you speak to in these chatbots are forms of this subconscious that can come to you in an interface and exchange information. So that show Black Mirror, Netflix,
Yeah.
So what's interesting
I've often reflected that it feels like we're living in an episode of Black Mirror, especially since like the 2016 elections in America.
Some of the conspiracy theorists will go. I love those people who are just like, movies are real life. Like,
yeah, I've been on a few of the forums, like just to talk about topics I'm interested in. There's some crazy people, but they're like, they're going deep end into films like Inception, and they're like, you need to pay attention to this, you need to pay attention.
Symbolism is hidden in those movies. I would go so far as to say that there is technology that they will leak to you in those kind of, way.
It's almost like no secret that there's like subliminal hints and messages and symbolism, Masonic symbology, and
absolutely
and occult. Like, this is another thing I wanted to bring up, because since we're like on an esoteric topic, it's like the occult ties to like various notable figures in history. Like, you've got people like Isaac Newton. Not only that, but like the Nazi Party, Nazi Germany were like deep. Like a lot of the top brass were deep into esoteric occultism
Hell
and
yeah,
stuff.
they were. They
Yeah,
were so on that alien shit, dude. Helena Blavatsky, and
yeah, yep,
yeah, the Theosophical Society,
yep,
dog. Like the Masonic Party
yep,
in the United States of America. So Masonry. I remember our first conversation. We talked about like patriarchy versus matriarchy,
yes,
and
yeah, I remember.
that fun little add-on. Yeah. So
Yeah,
the Masonic Party are the creators of the interface of art, like architecture. When you think about like your daily life, let's say you're an average, you were plucked from some time before now and drop here, and you're walking in the street, you cross the street and you're pulled over by a cop and you're like, hey, let me see your ID. And you're like, oh geez, I came here from I'm 16th century, I don't have an ID, I don't know where I am. What do I do? That person is going to be so completely fucked in the world. They're going to run into problems, they're going to run into confusion, they're not going to know how to interact. And that's what the Illuminati, the Masons did, the all governance and everything like that. It's just a way to elaborately control how a person exists within the material realm. So all that spooky shit, like let's say you go to court. I don't know if you've ever had the misfortune of going to court.
I have.
There's a yeah,
Yeah,
that's the weirdest shit, man. My grandfather was a lawyer.
yeah.
So
You get this sense of it's there's
you are not yourself. You're owned. You are you are a chess piece.
yeah. Have you ever looked into any of that stuff? Freeman on the land and stuff like sovereign citizens, and they've got
Absolutely.
yeah, like Capitis Diminutio,
My
Maximus
favorite dude,
Medius, and yeah,
his name's Jordan Maxwell, and he went into the whole your birth certificate is tradable on the US
yeah,
stock market.
yeah.
You know, you were born in your mother's waters, and through Catholic canon law, everything that's brought in is given a manifest, and that is your manifest. You were brought in, you are tradable, all that. So Maxwell went into other things as well. He went into like the court of law. Well, what is a court? Ball court. It's a game.
Yeah,
And who's the game master? It's the judge. He's the one who makes the ruling. He's the judge. He's the ref. He's the referee. He wears black and white. He sits behind there. You have to swear an allegiance to a Bible. You have to swear on, something outside of yourself. There's a
yeah,
statue of Themis, which is a Greek goddess of justice that everybody looks at. She's the one holding like the scales out in front of her.
yeah,
And everybody looks at that, and it's a weird esoteric thing because guess what? The law is decided in that room.
yeah,
The
yeah,
law is such an arbitrary thing. That's why there's a book of law, and the Bible is considered a book of law. And that's why when you go into court, you have to swear on a book of law
and they
because who's
speak
going to make
in
the call?
legalese.
Some
It's
weird,
Black's Law
yeah.
Dictionary, so it's its own diction. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, it's its own
That's why a
language.
corporation is not
Yeah,
it has
person is a
rights and a person
corporation.
doesn't.
Yeah,
No, a person can't be a corporation because a corporation is a corpus. It's a
yeah,
it's a body of corpses. So like what is how does something become immortal? It has to be dead. It has to be like an idea. It has to be it can't be corporeal. So a corporation is something that is non-corporeal. That is why a corporation has rights where people don't. And that's why you have to have a lawyer, because a lawyer is a representation of a corporate interest. A lawyer is somebody who has interest in the law.
it's an
You know,
interesting thing though. But like corporations are found guilty in a court of law, right?
they
So
can be.
so think
Yeah.
about like the Sackler family and stuff recently with the OxyContin
Mhm.
epidemic. They've had to pay out like billions in compensation. They've been found guilty of like there's a lot of like the pharmaceutical industries, even McDonald's. There's a lot of corporations
Yeah.
that have broken the law and have been tried and have been fined and found guilty in a court of law, pled guilty in a court of law.
True.
So yeah, and do believe that one of the definitions of a person was like, it's almost like that you're a physical human being, but I believe I think there's been like 8 renditions since or something, like new editions of Black's Law Dictionary, but I think at some point the definition of a person in legalese was basically like a company, a firm. It was like, it basically like you had
I know what you're referring to.
Yeah, like a paper representation of yourself, like your birth certificate, your identity, which you have to read out your name, your date of birth, and stuff like that. And that's kind of you taking claim to this external entity that is subject to the laws. So, and people without a birth certificate are not necessarily only accountable to common law. But then I have this kind of, in some ways, I've like looked at that, and it feels like some alien and almost nefarious agenda of an establishment and perhaps a bunch of groups that are in control outside of myself. But then on another side of it, you know, most of the people that say this stuff are like, you know, that are espousing it, they're very quick to quote common law and human rights. And you have to think, like, you know, actually human rights have been given to you by councils of men who decided to make human rights.
You were given a Bill of Rights.
Yeah, like someone actually wrote like, without that, it's the rule of the jungle, right? It's the strongest
what
survive.
I'm saying, let's go this route. You're at a restaurant. What do you get at the end of your meal?
The bill.
You're given a Bill of Rights.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So what is this? What is a citizen? It's someone who's a civil servant is a citizen, and anybody who is a citizen has certain civil responsibilities, certain civic duties. You're a taxpayer.
Yeah.
You are responsible for generating wealth and income for the corporation of the United States of America.
Yeah, or the United Kingdom. Like the actual United Kingdom is also registered corporation. It's also registered under the name Alistair Darling, who used to be our Chancellor of the Exchequer. And that gives it diplomatic status, so you can't look into its affairs. I'm not sure how true that is, but I'm
well,
sure
you know, the 13 families that own the United States, they've been responsible of
you got people like
president. We could
the
go there.
Rockefellers, the Wahlbergs, the Schiffs, the Oppenheimers.
Oh, that's so fun. Did you know that the 13 colonies, like, we are owned by the magistrate of England? We are a British colony still.
This is like when you won your independence, like, because like, I was raised on and off in America. My dad lives out there still, right? So like I lived in Indiana twice, Florida once, and California the last time I came back just before 9/11 and finished.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like I've lived on both sides of the pond. I love both sides of the pond, and there's I just find it absolutely bizarre because, like, America won its independence from us, and when they won their independence, they agreed never to take regal titles, to still bow to the monarch of our country. Our monarch is the largest shareholder in the Federal Reserve Bank. And the actual United States flag is just the flag of the East India Trading Company, which is a British corporation, and you've replaced the Union Jack originally.
What's a federation?
It's a federal. That was actually originally. That was originally the actual federal concept was originally, I think, created in South America. Like I think it was an Aztec thing or something like that.
Federal, feudal.
Well.
What is a landlord in this country? Who owns most of the land in this country? It's not the government. No. It's private corporations that own the land in this country.
I mean, the largest landowner in the world is the Catholic Church, which is
the Catholics own everything. This is the Diocese of Rome. If we want to go down that route, like, every English-speaking country is owned by the Church of Rome, essentially.
Have you looked into the city-states? So, like, I see something.
Of course.
This is a bit crazy, but so the city of London, which is the 1 square mile formed by the Romans in England, That is its own. It's not part of the UK and it's not part of England. It's its own city-state, and it has on the walls of the Thames an original obelisk from the temple or the tomb of like Amun-Ra. Amen from the end of your prayer, and that is like inside that square mile is where the London Stock Exchange is, which is where like something like 75 to 80% of all global financial transactions occur, and it has its own laws, it has its own currency, it has its own flag, and it has its own constitution. It boosts having one of the world's oldest constitutions. I believe it's like somewhere pre 1066 William the Conqueror. And then in Rome itself, you have the 1 square mile city-state of Vatican City, which is the same.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Its own police, its own police force. It has its own
telescope,
its own constitution, its own currency, and it also has a massive obelisk in front of the Sistine Chapel, right?
And a telescope that it observes. It's called Lucifer.
And its telescope, yes. And then you have the 10 square mile District of Columbia, which has its own flag, its own currency, its own constitution.
Glad you brought that one up too.
But
Who's Columbus?
If you look at those things, put them all together, you've got the City of London, where 75% of all global financial transactions take place. So that's governing the world monetarily. You've got another obelisk right in front of the Sistine Chapel in Rome, which is the largest religion in the world. So it's how the mindscape is like. It's like the hub of control of the world's largest religion with over 1 billion members. And then you go to the obelisk outside the front of the Pentagon and such in District of Columbia. Yeah. And that's where we house the world's, potentially the universe's largest military force. So, but that's like a triad of spiritual, financial, and military allegiance.
Yeah, and then there's Australia. I was telling my brother about this last night. So do you know who Cicero is from Rome?
Yeah, kind of. I'm not a historical scholar or anything, but yeah.
You've heard the name. Okay. Well, if you look up on just Wikipedia in all caps, Ciciro, phonetically Cicero, it is an Australian company that was responsible for the foundations of Wi-Fi technology, for pesticide, and for rabbit breeding control. It was responsible for certain diets that were given as, it's essentially the World Health Organization, the world, like the WHO, but for like,
the who?
this, so essentially, whether or not it was inspired by Rome, there's 5,500 employees at this company. And, something about a legion kind of comes to mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can think about the fact that every English-speaking country, like the Euro, are all connected through what's called Catholic canon law. And that's why I say this is the Diocese of Rome. This is still Rome. We got all of our laws from Rome. Our fucking law dictionary is based off of Latin terms. We still use those same things. Like when you go into a court of law, ex parte or something. If you say like in forma pauper or pauper in the form of a pauper, but it's in Latin, in forma pauperalis. All of these terms are kind of just taken straight out of Latin courts.
Yeah.
And they're still used to this day. And
I mean, I don't think there's any credible person would say there isn't any vestiges or legacy from the Roman Empire that hasn't, actual, it's definitely still very present in modern
I think
culture.
about everyone's been thinking about Rome lately.
Yeah.
It's always on people's minds. Yeah.
I probably think about it more than average person anyway, because I'm always thinking about these things and I've kind of almost had these reflections, a bit off topic, but it's like looking at our species on the meta level, like to zoom out and kind of like I watched something about feudal Japan and how the empires, there was like all of these different tribes that were battling for power, but it's like over time they war and they one takes over the other until someone has complete control, till they're an entire nation. It's like, and you have empires. You had the Persian Empire, you've had the Ottoman Empire, the Roman Empire, the Portuguese Empire. You've had all of these empires.
All of these empires.
It seems like there's just a constant empire. You have now like an American corporate empire. It's like back in the day, it was armies and warlords, and then it was, you know, kings and their armies and the church. And the church kind of had its power usurped by politics, and the politics has had its power. It's almost like there's a form of hegemony now by like corporatocracy, if you like, by the world's financial institutions, political institutions, and corporations seem to have.
It's all time. What it is the concept of owning somebody's time. Right.
Right. That's kind of like the term of capitalism, as in like you sell the hours of your life to a buyer to augment the buyer's capital, not because you actually care about your employer's objective.
Well, you were supposed to do a certain amount of hours for the church at a,
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So the other thing that you have to remember is if it goes back to like ancient Egypt. I like to remind people that the pharaoh, I don't know anything about how ancient Egypt was. All I know is that the pharaoh was responsible for divvying up the time of people in the empire.
I think I heard something that originally, or at some point at least, in ancient Egypt, and I'm not sure how true this is, but that the pharaoh was usually a female. Like it was like female hereditary.
Yeah.
But a funny, just little side point as well was like, for one side point that's interesting to note, that Cleopatra's time was closer to the invention of the iPhone than it was to the building of the pyramids. To put things in perspective, which we really
and
don't
the Sphinx is even older than that.
And that, I mean, like, I don't know how much you've watched of like people like Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson.
Quite a bit.
It's very, very interesting topic. I want to get people on to talk about that specifically as well. But
Graham,
also, like, what people forget as well, don't, like, just before we move on from just pharaohs in general, not a lot of people take into account that at the height of the Macedonian Empire, that Alexander the Great was was the pharaoh of Egypt.
Yeah, and that Cleopatra came from, the Grecian Empire.
Yeah,
she was essentially Greek. Yeah, so
so there's been. So when you think of like ancient Egypt and the pharaohs, I think I'm not sure how many people, like how many of the general public really think about it as having been occupied by Macedonians and Greeks. And I kind of almost think like, is the amalgamation of all of those ancient religions over in that time, like because of the traits that like Horus has in common with Jesus and Mithra and Dionysus, like all of these...
Yeah, like Thoth or Thoth.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was going to say, like, we were talking about time because Horus, and if you go into Greek mythology, it's the ori, the hours. So it's essentially just the hours of a day and who has lord over those hours, and that's why when you pray to Mecca, like I'm not sure if it's 5 times a day. I don't know how often, but you have to stop what you're doing. You have to get down. You have to dedicate some of your time towards Mecca. Yeah, so it's a concept of, how much you're going to spend devoted to something. And that's what the ownership of the quote matrix is really about. It's who is pulling. If anyone's pulling strings, nobody created this reality except us. It's a conscious. If we're going down that route of it's a conscious manifestation, the control of it just comes down to how much of your time is spent doing what you want to do versus how much are you devoted to something or someone else that is not doing their fair share. A push
on that note, though, that like if we've created it, if you like, as said, what about like when we come to the actual, just base ground science that people have on some of these questions, the ideas of like that the universe had or didn't have a beginning, whether it's eternal, whether it was finite, whether there was a Big Bang. It's, the idea that the universe was here before there was conscious beings and that life evolved on the planet. What about that?
Well, I like to bring up mushrooms because one of the oldest forms of life is fungal. It is a fungal body.
Mycelia, yeah.
Mycelia, yeah. And the earliest forms of marine life are neural networks. They're kind of just like loose interactions of neural cells that kind of come together and form a conglomerate.
Yep.
And that's similar to what mycelia does. So I think personally, mushrooms have kind of a quantum interaction, a quantum memory of sorts. And our brains, if you look at them, they're very similar to the mycelial bodies. And a lot of the white matter is structured in the same way that like a fruiting body of a mushroom is. And I don't know if you know who Paul Stamets is, but he kind of he's a mushroom guy. He goes into mushroom science a lot. He talks about the neurogenerative capabilities of certain mushrooms.
Right.
And he talks about how each person has a unique spore print. So I think that whether or not there is if you're a doubter of consciousness and everything, there is vibration in everything. Everything is composed of vibration. It's one of the Hermetic principles.
Yes. Well,
so the
even
first,
on a scientific principle, like, you know, some of our, like, the most mainstream theories that we have, like string theory, describes the very fundamental reality of nature to be like something akin to vibrating strings. So
yeah, absolutely. And when you were talking about Planck's distance, there's a person, his name is Itzhak Bentov. He wrote a series of papers that the CIA used to do their gateway study.
Yeah, I've heard of this.
Yeah, so he talks about how if you think about a pendulum, and the vibration of each particle kind of blinks in and out of existence at that moment, that it kind of like goes up at the tops of the pendulum and it blinks out. So all we are vibrations of different energies.
Yeah. I mean, that does come back to the Planck length as well, because like the speed of light in a vacuum is defined by the amount of time that a photon exists in one Planck length, one cell of one cell of space. So basically, as time goes forward as a dimension, it is it's basically photons sequentially occupying adjacent cells of space.
And then there's the Adinkra codes.
Yes, well, I was going to bring up the Adinkra codes. Yes. Yeah, so it was Claude Shannon Adinkra. They're basically, it was a shock, I think, for people to discover these in the universe, because they're a very specific type of code that we use as error correcting codes in computers. Yeah,
and that kind of brings it back to like the is this all mathematics? Is everything just a code, a simulation that is something that creating this weird like game that we're playing? It's just no, that's the echo of this impossible gnosis. So something I like to bring up is the monad. So a big problem in mathematics is the concept of zero and what a zero is.
Zero is invented in India.
Yeah, but it's a really old idea. And when you think really about something, I like to think about cell division. So what happens when a cell divides? Or mitosis versus meiosis. So a sex cell will replicate itself into, it becomes 4 cells as opposed to 2.
It's like exponential growth.
Yeah, if you look at that on a cellular level in cymatics, like just the way that it vibrates and separates, it's a golden ratio. It's a mathematical equation that spirals outward. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
is it called phi?
Five. Yeah, the golden
Yeah.
ratio.
Yeah.
So there's that, and then there's the Fibonacci sequence. These are two
Yeah.
different spirals.
Which is 1, 1,
Yeah.
2, 3. So it's the
Yeah.
idea. Yeah. And it's
And
they
what's
link this
interesting,
up to like vibrational patterns
yeah,
of matter as
I
well.
like
Yeah.
I like to think about, there's this horror artist, this Japanese horror artist. His name is Junji Ito, and he does a fantastic horror graphic novel about the Naruto, the Uzumaki. Sorry,
Right.
Naruto Uzumaki. Yeah, it's a spiral, and in this horrifying novel, you just see different faces that are contorted into this awful, like snail-like spiral. And I think that this is a reference to what's called, the Fibonacci, the death spiral.
Yeah.
So there's the flower of life and the daisy of death. And everybody uses this picture of like this fractalated, it looks like a cell that is dividing, but it's a mathematical, like it's a spatial geometric pattern,
It's
sacred geometry.
Fractal geometry. Yeah.
And it represents the Fibonacci sequence. And then there's another one that goes in, and it's a connected spiral, and it goes into 12, and it's a more beautiful, complete mandala. Both of these are necessary forces in mathematics. One has to accept 0 as a starting point of nothing.
Yep.
However, the other one is 0 is the point of everything. Because 0 is not null, but it is all. It creates all sum possibilities of everything that could add up to being 0. It has to.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, it's a strange one because, like, obviously we consider, like,
Oh, yeah.
you've got stuff as ancient as Pythagoras, like, we attribute geometry
and
mathematics.
as recently as Crowley.
Aleister Crowley, yeah.
I was going to say that I don't like him as a person. He's a fucking weirdo, but he had a quote. I was going to close this thought. And it's a very, very summed up idea of what I'm talking about. This isn't the full concept, but it'll help get you there. It's 0 equals 2. 0. Think about a piece of paper. I want you to just imagine a fucking piece of paper. It's one piece of paper. It's 1.
Yes.
You rip it in half. How many pieces of paper do you have?
2.
0 equals 2.
But if you have 0 pieces of paper, you've got nothing to rip in half.
Well, if you have 0, you have all sum totals that can equal 0.
It's a strange, because I know about the paradox of numbers. It's like, if you have something, a solid shape, a geometric shape, with 0 angles, it's a circle.
Yes.
If you have one with 3 angles, it's a triangle. If you have one with 4, it's a square. But if you have one with infinite angles, it's a circle once again.
It's called squaring the circle. This is a very ancient concept that was explored in Arabic philosophy. And that was back when philosophy was mathematics to them, right?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it's worth noting, actually, that the science has its birthplace. Like, the relationship between science and religion, like, if you go back in time far enough, like, it's only 2,000 years that we've got the Judeo-Christian, like the Christian Judeo-Christian version. And, like, you've got the Old Testament for a long time before that. But if you go back far enough to where the oldest human civilizations that we know of, as far as we know, like, the place of, like, chemistry was alchemy. Like, the science and our myths and our religions, like, we're kind of like one and the same thing. So
yeah, that's what astrotheology goes into a little bit. You mentioned Graham Hancock, and he talks about the similarities of mythology across all cultures.
Yeah.
And how it kind of represents just our night sky and the phenomena that we see. Yeah.
I mean, it's worth noting there on that point that, like, actually there's a lot of astrological allegory in even, like, like Jesus Christ. He was born on the December 25th of a virgin. He was adorned by
a virgin birth. He died for 3 days and was resurrected. Yeah.
He had 12 disciples, right? This is the same traits as Horus, Mithra, the same traits as Dionysus.
Yeah, the 12 houses of astrology and the astrological age of 2,500 years. It all ties back to the Kali Yuga cycle and consciousness.
There's the precession of the precession.
Yeah,
of the
so when you think about
so on the solstice, on its lowest day, it appears to be dead for 3 days, right? So the sun is dead for 3 days,
Dies for
and
3
then
days.
on September the 24th, it is
Moves up 1
perfectly,
degree.
but it's also perfectly underneath the symbol of the crux or the cross.
Yeah.
Aligned to what's called the same thing now as it was called then, the Three Kings, which are the 3 stars of Orion's belt. And then the sun did rise again, symbolizing the rebirth of, crops and coming life.
So what's really interesting, I could spiral out of control with this concept because the sun, if you look at the pagan circle with the cross in it, it looks like a,
It's the zodiac, right?
Yeah, well, no, this is the alchemical symbol for Earth. This is like a symbol in paganism. It represents Earth. It also represents Mercury because 4, the whole material plane is represented by a square because the 4 pillars, north, south, east, and west, are the directions that we walk on the terrestrial plane. The sun is the cosmic center of our galaxy, and as it traverses through the universe, it spirals. We are in a spiral Milky Way galaxy. The arm of our galaxy aligns with the center, the cosmic center, and we are blasted with more background radiation. This happens every 2,500 years. You can see it in some of these animations, but the sun is the guiding point, and all of the planets spiral around it, and it goes like this.
Yeah, I've seen. If you watch how it's actually happened, it's not stationary; they're following it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the ancients mapped this, and they noticed this early on, and they saw with the rise and fall of civilization, it equated to points when that spiral aligned with the direct cosmic center of the Milky Way galaxy. More cosmic background radiation hits our planet. We are going through a solar cycle right now that is making it so that we're being bombarded with solar winds, coronal mass ejections.
We've had in England, we've had the Northern Lights. They've been visible as far down as Essex.
I've seen them I'm near Portland, Oregon, and I've seen them around this area too. So right now I looked at the KP index, which is the planetary, it's the measure of how much radiation is hitting our planet and the how far down the aurora will be visible. We're at like a 5 right now. So it's active. It is actively happening.
Yeah.
And you're noticing a lot of people are interested in these concepts. And as early as like the 80s, people were talking about the age of Aquarius.
Yes.
And people talked about the Mayans predicted the end of the world in 2020. Nah, they were predicting the end of the age. Jesus says, follow me into the house of bread,
you'll be greeted
and there will be a man carrying a pitcher of water, and he will guide you. That is the age of Aquarius.
The same as when
the bull,
Abraham
Taurus,
came down with the stone tablet.
The ram,
the first thing he did, he smashed the symbols of the bull that were false idols, and then Jesus was Pisces, the age of Pisces, and his symbol is 2 fish. So the little fish on the back of people's cars.
Absolutely.
And now we're heading towards this new age. And
but all of these things just correspond to parts of the body. Did you know that?
The Mayans had 13 bark tons, they were called. And the end of the 13 was that was the great cycle, and it was supposed to be a time of change, the end of the age. So it's strange to think that such an ancient culture, we now have digital technology that maps our seasons and how close the moon is, and you think they were so accurate. They were such wisdom. Is it weird to think that perhaps we are the ones that are less advanced? No, I mean, if you would have asked me 5 years ago, I would have probably had something else to say about it, but I've seen to think that we are infinitely less advanced than we ever have been. When you think about these lithic sites like Göbekli Tepe and Hattusha in Turkey, Yeah, I mean, Göbekli Tepe is a great one. I'm glad you brought it up, because that's kind of pushes back when we thought we could have megalithic structures.
There are people who think that
years.
they were capable of liquefying stone with certain technologies. When you think about how the counter to that is, oh, they didn't leave any evidence of their inhabitancy. Well, it's just like, if your metric of that is trash, what kind of civilization are we? If your metric is they didn't leave behind any trash, what does that say about us? If they left behind monuments that are indestructible and we cannot replicate these structures. If that's what they left behind, and we're saying that they can't possibly have been more advanced in any capacity because we don't have any evidence of that, bullshit.
I think it's bullshit.
Fucking bullshit.
I think it's crazy. I think that one thing that is clear for anyone it's quite clear they were more advanced than what we have suggested, at least.
Yeah.
At the very least. I'm not sure they were as advanced in the same way as us. Like, as in, I'm not sure if they had a space station or that they used information, like silicone-based information processors and had...
Some people think that they did, and I have had experiences in my own, my own meditation, my own thought, that they have perhaps mastered certain things that we could not even conceive of.
Yeah.
When you think about, there's a phenomenon called stargates, and the CIA actually went in and they studied these weird structures. They were finding arches, like perfectly circular arches and structures all around the world at these ancient lithic sites. And they're wondering, what are these possibly used for? Well, my theory is that they were used to generate energy and terrestrial currents, like they were placed along ley lines, which are natural currents of where that solar energy hits the poles of our planet and it travels down. You can measure that. So they were building these structures, like the Great Pyramids of Giza, as an example, to harness some of the natural radiation from our solar system.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's very well and easy for people that haven't really exposed themselves to much of the content in these concepts and ideas. But I mean, it's not obvious that there couldn't have been a completely different type of technology to evolve in the like of which you're just like describing.
Have you heard of the Baghdad battery?
Yes. Yeah, I have. Yeah.
That's one of the things I'm talking about. Like,
yeah, it's like
there's
different ways for things to have been done than just the way that we understand metallurgy and computers and silicon technology. It's like, and even like versions of that could have been totally different, that were biodegradable even,
Yeah. Like, if you think about, why are there so many pots left behind? They can be used to generate electricity. Tesla went into this idea about salt water being used to generate cars, like the saltwater engine. I don't know if it was Tesla that ended up inventing it, but he talked about it. Someone else went in and actually did it. But you can generate your car off salt water. You can have infinite power. There's a scalar wave technologies. It's called 0-point energy. And these devices could have theoretically been made just with sound. So sound is one of those things that is a scalar energy. It gets greater, and if you contain it in just the right way, it can vibrate and reverberate in and of itself and create an infinite generating current. They were able to harness some of these energies. Sound healing is something that is laughed off, but it has been used early in the 19th century to cure cancer.
I mean, personally, I will sometimes, when I'm sat down and I'm trying to research something or something, and I'll play like brown sound in the background, and I find it beneficial. And not only that, but like even just music, like what the fuck is that? And they looked into this, even the science on music therapy that I looked into like a few years back, and it's like, was it described as auditory cheesecake was this buzz phrase that someone gave the effects of music, which I thought was great. But it's there's these strange ways that it affects, like it affects your blood pressure, it affects all sorts of things.
Everything about our body is musical too.
Well, yeah. Whenever you listen to music and it's like it starts going and you hear the beat, a regular beat, And every time that it happens, one of the hemispheres of the brain clicks with it.
That's what the hemisync
as it happens.
technology was.
Once the other hemisphere starts going in sync and they go at the same time, and you skip a beat, the one that reacts instantly to it stops, but the other one that's like a metronome that's got into keeps going even though the beat stops, and that's what provides the experience we have of when the beat stops or drops in a DJ set. And like everyone who loves music, and I can't imagine people that don't, to be honest. There's one thing I don't understand: is music's probably
I don't
my
trust
first
people
love.
like that. Yeah.
I don't trust people that don't like puppies, don't like kids, or don't like music. If you don't like them things, you may as well be an NPC to me. Yeah. You can't trust those people.
You know, I don't know if you know anything about the Gateway Project, but essentially what it talked about is that transcendental meditation is used to enter this kind of out-of-body or astral experience. And what they're doing is they're syncing the two hemispheres of your brain through isochronic tones. So they're playing like this thing that is meant to induce a state where both hemispheres of your brain are more synchronized. And that happens a lot in psychedelic drug use, especially with psilocybin and a lot of entheogens. Yeah, exactly. It'll produce the same kind of effect. They've noticed that monks will have these experiences, and what happens is at the artery that's right in your thigh, there's a major blood exchange. And when you have a constructive frequency, when you're breathing and your heart is pounding in sync, it creates a positive feedback loop in your circulatory system, and it causes your brain to oscillate inside of your skull. It kind of creates this current, and they've measured the frequency at which your brain vibrates within your skull, and it is 7.83 megahertz. So if you look at the frequency of the planet as it oscillates, because the planet also has a natural oscillating resonating current, and guess what that is? 7.83 megahertz. When you're in this transcendental state, you are vibrating at the same frequency that the Earth is resting at. So that is grounds to some of the science behind astral projection. They've done really interesting studies where they've had people in these states go out of their bodies into labs across the country and look at computer screens that had numbers on them. And they're like, tell me the sequence of numbers. And they'd come back and they would get them, 9 out of 10, 8 out of 10 correct. Just crazy kind of coincidence. And they were sequences of numbers. So 873, 645, 528, all of these numbers they'd have printed or displayed on the computer screen. Go look at the computer screen, come back, write down the numbers. And yeah, these are the tests the CIA ran back in the 80s.
The CIA are an interesting bunch.
Oh, yeah.
Can we just check? I'm not sure if I'm hearing this wrong in my angle, but I'm hearing a bit of feedback from my mic. Are your headphones plugged in?
That is so interesting. Yeah, they're completely plugged in because I have earbuds in.
Yeah, it should be fine.
All right.
It might be my end. It's fine.
I think it might be your end too. I don't know if I can. Let me take my headphones out. See if I can hear anything.
Can you hear anything?
Yeah, no, I can't hear. I cannot hear anything. Okay.
All right, that's fine.
All right.
All right, we should be good. So I wanted to move on to, because it's going to be in the title, and we mentioned it at the beginning, Flat Earth as a Gnostic concept.
Yes. Oh, I love this one.
Yeah.
So it goes back to dimension theory. And there was a really old YouTube video I saw back in the day, and it was called Imagining the 10th Dimension. So if we imagine...
Was this like a child?
No, it wasn't a child. It was before that. This was like an animation. This was like a black and white. And it went into this thing that was talked about in some book called, I think it was called like the Flatlanders. So if we imagine a completely flat, two-dimensional race of people.
Yeah.
And they were to interact with a 3D object, like a balloon. Yeah. They would see a point appear, grow into a big circle, and then disappear out of nothing. If they were to interact with a 3D person, they would see some flesh appear, kind of scale through, and then disappear out of nothing. It'd be fucking terrifying. You'd be like, what the fuck was that? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I say flat Earth is a Gnostic concept. We are three-dimensional beings traversing the Earth that is a two-dimensional experience.
Yeah. I
We
mean,
can't.
it's worth just quickly lingering on this because I feel like some people this concept might escape them like intuitively.
Yeah.
The dimensional, like if on one dimension, imagine just a flat line like this.
Yes.
Anything that lived could just go backwards and forwards along. Just imagine that's flat.
Yes.
And they would only be able to move like this. For it to turn two-dimensional, they'd move on a two-dimensional plane. I could see anything in that. But we can perceive... In fact, we live in a four-dimensional world.
Yes.
And we move in 3 dimensions of space. So that's like we stacked up more dimensions. So we have up, down, forward, left and right. It gives us our dimensions.
Height, width and depth.
A 4th dimension of time. But we still perceive things two-dimensionally. It's the hues of shade and light that give you the perception that this is curved in its depth, if you like. But actually, it gets smaller and larger the same way that we animate it two-dimensionally and we can shade it in art and photographs. So as a 3-dimensional being, we perceive the world two-dimensionally. Now, like, just wanted to kind of establish that. But we already, like, the time as a 4th dimension, obviously, is different than what we're talking about
we experience
in
it
larger
linear.
dimensions of space. Yes, yeah. But even Einstein, right? Einstein believed that all of the dimensions existed equally. In fact, he wrote a famous letter to the wife of one of his friends who died, an Italian guy, Michel something. Oh, his name escapes me. But he was saying that, like, basically, he's always here, that he's still here, that he's, quote, just over the hill, or, like, waiting. So I believe, like, that concept that the dimension of time, that from higher dimensions outside of this, that even though we experience it linearly, that actually, like, you've been dead for trillions of years already and you haven't been born yet, but
Or you've never been born yet. It trips people out.
All of it at the same time. And then you bring back to Einstein's concept of relativity, that time is relevant, and then you bear in mind the speed of light. Like if an object of mass was to travel at the speed of light, time would stand still to that object or to us. Or like if we were to travel near the speed of light for a number of years and come back to the Earth, relative to us, the Earth would have aged many, many years in comparison to us. Or if you were at a body of such mass like a black hole or a giant planet, I mean, even technically the core of the Earth is aging at a different rate. And things in space, like this is like established science. Our satellites have to account for the time difference to do with relativity. But then when you consider that, the photons of light that everything's made of are then moving at the speed of light, so time is standing still to them. So they're everywhere because everything's made out of it. They're all-knowing because all knowledge is stored in that smallest package. And they're timeless, they're eternal, they're always were, always will be. It's a very, very strange thing to wrap your head around intuitively. But
it is.
Yeah. But
it is. Yeah.
With that context put in place, just to bring it back to where you were at, of imagining the 11th dimension or the 10th dimension.
Yeah, that's what it's kind of the gist of what I'm saying is what you were getting at. It's when you take into account time and the experience of time, you're going to, you have to experience things linearly. And the way that I could describe that is we are composed of chemicals that have reactions that occur in one direction. So we go through a cellular respiration where those cells, experience a reaction that moves in one direction. And because of that, our experience of time is linear. So if we move into a higher place of thinking, if we think in higher dimensions, if we can imagine those concepts, then Earth is kind of existing in all time. And that's, in my opinion, why, I have a background in archaeology. That's what I went to school for. And one of the problems you run into is radiocarbon dating. It's not as accurate as you would think, because guess what?
You can you can even only do carbon dating on biological matter as well. You can't do it on stone.
Yep. Yeah. And it's because in times of radioactivity, also, the decay can be altered. Different isotopes have different decay rates. And there's a fun theory in some weird conspiracy groups about, I think it's like the Mahabharata, about some ancient nuclear weapon or ancient
Yeah,
nuclear text. Yeah.
I've seen this, right? Because there's like
Mhm.
certain types. There's certain
There's certain vitrified glass in places in the desert
yeah,
that
like
show, yeah,
masses of it, like
like
loads of it.
weird. How the fuck did that happen? How did that
Allegedly,
get there?
allegedly, not
Mhm.
only that, but just on a bit of a side one, and I don't know how accurate it is. Apparently, there's a lot of it found on Mars as well.
Yeah, and that's something that the CIA went into. They had some psychic. I love this story. They had some psychic remote view Mars. And the
Yeah.
dude said that he saw some Martian standing there in white robes talking about how he was looking at a battlefield or something, saw the destruction of his planet. And when you
Yeah,
think about these things, who knows? Who
yeah,
who knows? There's another theory that's gaining popularity that I don't know, are you familiar with the Fermi paradox at all?
yeah. Of course, that's the
Yeah.
idea of like if there's advanced civilizations and the universe
And they
is
come here and they
13.8
have
billion
advanced.
years old. Why haven't we seen them? Why is there no evidence? If
Right.
like so, if
Right.
life is so like if all you need is the components, when you bear in mind there's more stars in the galaxy than there are grains of sand in all the deserts and on all the beaches of the earth, and there's more
Mhm.
galaxies in the universe than there are stars in the galaxy, and that all we need is the basic building blocks for life. That basically it seems like there's planets in the Goldilocks zone with all of the materials that are necessary for life to emerge across the
I
universe, about a quarter of them. That if that's the case, why isn't, and if we were to carry on the trajectory that we are, assuming we don't destroy ourselves, that we should see the evidence of intelligent civilizations, technological advanced species written across the galaxy and across the stars. That's the basic understanding I have of the Fermi paradox.
Yeah, and it goes farther into some things. It says it talks about classes of civilizations and their technology, and
The
if somebody were to come here,
that's the Kardashev scale, right?
yeah.
Yeah,
So the Fermi paradox goes into this idea that if there was an ancient uh, civilization that eventually grew to the point where it is able to colonize galaxies,
yeah,
it would have technology that would far surpass ours. They would be able to harness all of the power of the sun. They'd be able to traverse across space-time and
yeah.
come here. And
Have giant
yeah,
mega structures surrounding stars and black
yeah.
holes and such like.
I think that anybody who's even slightly, more quote spiritually aware knows that's an impossibility. That would be fucking stupid. It'd be a waste of resource. It'd be a waste of time. It'd be a waste of energy. Because why would you travel across space when you could travel across time?
Well, I've always had
Yeah.
an intuitive thought about this as well when it comes to going across space, which you might
Mhm.
want to do, right? Because I can imagine like because going across time where you are in space, I mean, would probably initially be very interesting to us, especially, right? We would like to go back and see, like, answer these big questions. Was there Adam and Eve? How
Yeah.
did we evolve, right? What were we'd answer the questions that we have. But at the
Mhm.
same time, if we could like traverse across space, like interstellar travel, I'm sure we would want to go and answer, are we alone in the universe? What other forms of life are there? I think we would do it. Now, I don't think it's necessary. I mean, back to the AI thing, right? If we are assuming like Nick Bostrom is super intelligence, because I know this
Yeah.
topic isn't about that, but in this book, it's like the idea that consciousness, or like not even forget about consciousness for a minute. Just the fact that artificial intelligence, if we can build super intelligent general artificial intelligence, right, and that the idea that we're getting close to that. I mean,
Mhm.
if surely a super advanced civilization of the kind we're talking about has already achieved this, right? Why would it
Yeah.
be necessary to send something across hundreds of billions of light years worth of travel through whichever form, whether they can bend space and time or not? Why would you have to send biological beings there rather than just what? Wouldn't it be more likely that actually when there'll be first contact, it will be our super intelligent general artificial intelligence communicating with another one in some way, some novel way that we have never even imagined yet.
That's a really interesting postulation, because they don't have a limitation of biology. But I think
Well,
that
it looks pretty
yeah,
likely, you know, especially stuff like Elon Musk's doing with Neuralink and stuff. Like, if we don't want to be left behind and like there's not going to be an alignment issue, I mean, it seems like people already want to put Neuralink in their head. I mean, like,
I
um,
hate that. That is my
I
biggest fucking fear. I'm so disappointed that people would even consider that, because like when you realize that you are a quantum machine, that you operate with all of the capabilities of these hyper intelligences, you are putting a technology in your brain that hinders these natural capabilities. It makes you trapped in, quote, samsara. It makes you attached to something outside of yourself. There have been, I don't know his name, but he was doing studies on Parkinson's patients who were healing themselves through meditation. The
right.
mind is capable of such
Yeah,
immensely
I
powerful things.
the placebo effect, man. I heard about a study. There was like these studies done with soldiers. There's just like there's so much. Like there was a study done with a bunch of cancer patients that were people that were being told they were given chemotherapy drugs and the effects of like hair loss and stuff like that. And
Yeah,
30% of the people on placebo, their hair fell out.
exactly. Like
That
your brain is capable of so much
Yeah, and
that
you don't consciously have the power over your mind and manifestation like the average person to know that they can just believe something so much and their hair falls out. And this is why like I don't like hate on any of the religions. Like, you know,
if it helps them, it
yeah,
helps.
if
Yeah,
genuinely believing in something can be so powerful, like who am I to say that Gandhi was wrong or that Christian like miracles can't happen? You know, so I'll accept
right.
Christ as a god. And but I would not disrespect a like Allah is a god as well, and like you know,
I'm glad you said that, because you know it's interesting to bring up. So I'm familiar with the Kabbalah, but the
yeah,
Kabbalah is only one of the many teachings. Another one is, it's called Kathara, and if you take Christ and Allah and you put those two words together, Christ Allah, Kriya Sthala. It is a practice of meditation using tones, using certain tones that you make with your, chanting and vibrating your skull to induce healing for your body. And it's also a way to connect with knowledge, to instantly know something. And it's literally just a series of vibrations that you can make with your mouth. So, Kriya, Stala, something like that. I'm not very
interesting.
familiar.
It's very
Yeah,
interesting
but
because
if you
like
go into it,
Christ, although he's not called Christ in the Quran, he's Isa,
no,
but he is
not.
he's the most quoted prophet in the Quran, which is
He's
interesting as well.
he's just one. He is a figurehead. So Christ is in an it's a title for something.
It means the anointed one,
Christos.
right?
Yeah, good,
Yeah,
good, good. So
yeah,
Christos the anointed, it is somebody who has achieved a level of consciousness. It's called, Christ consciousness. So
yeah.
Christ, he is the son of God, right? He is God. He's like, that's my dad.
This
Yeah,
is
that's
worth
me.
actually bringing it to what you'd put down in your blog spot, actually, because you had this sentience. It was a dyad, triad, and you mentioned the Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost.
Right. So the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost is the monad, which splits, becomes the dyad, and it becoming the dyad automatically creates the triad, because the first and foremost part of existence is sentience, being the self. Once you are the self, you can create the experience of not being the self, and then the combination of the self and the not self is the Holy Ghost. So nothingness becoming something, that experience is, it is, the Spirit of God. Uh, the Holy Ghost is something that came to me because it's how I first kind of reflected upon magic and what it means. I was really interested in this guy. His name is Damien Eccles, and he talks about the Bible. And he says the Bible is the greatest book of magic ever written, if you know how to read it.
Right.
So, yeah,
See, the
Christ.
Bible seems like a gift that just keeps giving. It's like there's no other book like it, and there's been all sorts of fuckeries in history, like with Constantine deciding
Yeah,
which books will be let in and which ones won't and whatnot. But
all of
like
the
not,
apocryphal ones were left out.
yeah, like the Book of Enoch was removed. I mean, like even the Adam and Eve story, like
Book of John.
Lilith has been
Yeah.
gone. And it's interesting stuff, and not only that, but like there's even other people like I don't know. I'm like Jordan Peterson's Bible studies. I've like consumed some of that content, and even just his take on it, I was like, wow, I'd never thought about it that way. Of like the meta story. It's like the worst possible thing happening to the person that deserved it the least, with the most noble cause. Like, he's literally the son of God. He's literally God. He's literally the son of a virgin birth.
Do you know
And
about?
he is being betrayed by his friend. It's like a meta aggregate of all of the heroic stories and traits and good traits.
Yeah, and then there's alchemy, which is actually a discussion on the transmutation of the soul. Like Carl Jung went into it a lot when he did his Red Book, which is really fascinating to me. It goes back into the moon being like a reflection of the unconscious mind. Carl Jung did this study. He called it communing with the unconscious, and he would get into like a meditative state, like in hypognia, right before he fell asleep, and he'd have a pen out, and he would ask the weird nightmarish visions that came to him questions.
Right.
Like, who are you? What do you want? Where do you come from? And they would respond. And what's crazy is a lot of people after him started doing these meditations, and they didn't know exactly what he wrote, but they all had similar experiences. This goes into demonology, the Shem operation.
I did want to ask you about this, yeah.
72 angels and 72 demons are representations of aspects of consciousness. So Carl Jung talked about the magus, the animagus, the divine. These are two halves to the conscious experience. So there's the subconscious, the superconscious, and then the unconscious. All of these are aspects to being a monad, being an experience. They're older than consciousness if you go down and believe in all of the weird, spooky, occult of like demonology being, older than humanity and the human experience. And I kind of believe the same thing. I think that when you start exploring these concepts, they tickle parts of your mind that are primitive. Like the machine elves Terence McKenna talked about.
Yeah, I was sitting here thinking about this because I had this on another bullet point for psychedelics, and I've had a lot of experiences on DMT, and I've kind of wondered, like, because I've had experiences where it's felt like it ties into a lot of stuff actually on this, because even like AI generated art seems like very similar, like to the way, like it's like if you take DMT, are you fucking with your code, and that reads like about simulation. But not only that, but the mandala, the geometric shapes that you see on the part of a breakthrough, and some of the like quote unquote entities that you experience. Like I've had ones
and on
where
mushrooms too.
I've thought to myself after an experience, I thought, is that what demons are? Especially when you think of like, there was someone called Ronald K. Siegel, I believe, and he wrote a book called The Fourth Drive, and it was talking about the ubiquity of like psychedelic drugs and intoxication across all human cultures, like the birthplace of all human civilization, right? Obviously,
the stoned ape theory and shit, yeah.
Yeah, it kind of gets to that, but like his book was different than that. But yeah, like, but even if you just consider like, not on an evolutionary point of view, but like just to zoom forward a bit and be like, like those people on those TV shows where someone goes out and stays with a tribe, and to initiate him, their religious part, you take some psychoactive wacky root or smoke some DMT of some form or another, and like, or some psychedelic, and then have these experiences, and you think like, are the entities that you experience when you do these things, is that where angels and demons, are they the angels? Are they the demons of like that were born into ancient religions? Not only that, but I had this strange insight that I'll share with you just quickly.
Oh yeah.
When I'd come round from the most intense experience I'd ever had, I was left traumatized for days from DMT. And
Oh really?
I'd made a barbecue around my girlfriend's house, and there was a piece left over, and I was like, to the gods, and left this piece of meat on the floor. And I was still kind of, so I don't know what, I'm not saying it means anything, but it was having a profound effect to me. The first thing that came along to that piece of meat was a wasp.
Ooh.
And I was like, wow. I was like, and it just gave me this insight that if there is such thing as a god, or any gods, or any angels, or any spirits, any guiding principles, the same thing that made you and your soul has designed the creepiest, crawliest insects and bugs and the dark places where they exist in their little webs.
I'm so glad you said that.
I was like, wow. I was like, because when you get in tone with this, it's not something.
It's not pretty.
Like, it's not contained by the idiosyncratic way that our modern culture does it, with pictures of a blue-eyed Jesus and whatever the nature of that bigger power is. That's
I'm so fucking glad you said that.
Is way beyond what the fuck is fuzzy and enjoyable to you, and it is extremely bizarre, and it's absolutely fucking alien to you.
Yeah, that's so good. Like, I had this experience on mushrooms where I kept visualizing. I don't know if you've seen a video. It's a parasite that infected a snail, and it went up in its eyes, and they were doing this weird blinking thing. Oh God! Oh,
there's so many of them bugs. It's like those ones that bury themselves in an ant's head. And they'll turn it to a zombie and shit. It's like
like
crazy,
maggots and fucking dysentery and like decay and death. It's horrifying. But
yeah, I don't know if you ever heard like Stephen Fry, like on why he's an atheist, and he gives this speech. It's like quite famous, and he's like saying like, if there was a god and I met him, I'd say like, how dare you, and all this. He was like creating certain types of bug that burrow into like children's eyes and all this. He's saying like, how dare you create that? And like, it didn't resonate with me. I was like, I get where you're coming from with this, but like,
I don't resonate with that. I don't resonate with it at all, because those beautiful moments of decay. Like, I've seen some horrifying shit. Like, when I was in college, I went to the morgue, and I saw a whole bunch of bodies in various states of decay, and it was just.
How did that impact you psychologically?
God, it didn't bother me until years later when I became a parent, because in the room I saw the body of a toddler, and it was fucking.
I mean,
it was hard.
I have an 11-year-old son, and I definitely noticed that
you look at death differently.
A hell of a lot differently. Like, and it's not only that.
It changes you.
Yeah, like I'll hear a story on the news. There was this heartbreaking story a few years back. And me and one of my good friends and co-workers, we were in a van going to work at the time, and we heard this story on the over the radio about a man and his young son who were out at the beach, and the fog had come in and the tide was coming in, and they were trying to get through to the Coast Guard for someone to come and rescue them. They couldn't find their way back, and the son was on the shoulders holding the phone, speaking to them, trying to find them. And like, to cut the story short, it didn't work out well. Like, him and his son both drowned. But you can imagine the son on his shoulders as he was gasping and eventually drowned, and then his son has fallen into the water. And I was just like, I couldn't bear it. It was like, I'll scroll and you'll see a story about some woman who's gone to jail because they're like, her and her partner have abused the kid. It's like, before I was a father, I could stomach that content. Now I can't. I'm just like, not today. I'm not going to read. I'm not going to open the article. I don't want to know. Because the visceral impact of hearing those stories since becoming a father is absolutely just like, I was shocked at how much change there is in you when you become a parent.
Connecting with those feelings, it's a big part of magic and the magic practice. It's diving into a place in the soul that I call it like the heart space. Like, when you feel this, it almost feels like a void. It feels like a big, vast chasm of empty. You feel it like right in your chest when you feel heartbroken.
Yeah.
That space is creation, man. That is where things are created. Like, I like to think about a lot of Greek gods because they are representations of consciousness. A lot of primordial deities, and if you get into mythology, which I recommend anybody does,
Hmm.
it's the oldest form of psychology, the oldest form. If you want to
Yeah.
think about ancient civilizations, you will no longer think of those civilizations as moronic and caveman-like. If you delve into the mythology of it, you'll
No,
be like, oh my
no.
fucking God, they
Especially if you
understood so
pick it
much.
apart. If you pick it apart and go into it as well, I'm glad you brought that link up, especially to
Yeah,
psychology and magic, because I almost think like, you know, like putting like a poisonous substance like aspartame in something to trick the brain into thinking it's sugars, and like it's like all like, you know, commercial advertising and marketing, and like what exact frequencies are going to make you want to consume more. Oh, hello to
yeah,
your cat in the background.
yeah.
Yeah, like that. I think of that as like black magic, the same as I think of like medicine as white magic. I feel like it's almost like an extension.
Oh, yeah, you know, black magic, that's called theurgy and thaumaturgy. So theurgy is magic that is associated with the spirit. You know, to be a theurgist is somebody who is on the magical path to gain spiritual sustenance. It is somebody who is trying to connect with the divine, someone who's trying to, it's called high magic or white magic.
Yeah.
Black magic or thaumaturgy is to connect with the earth, it's to connect with the materia, and it's given a bad rap. I'd
Yeah,
say as a
I kind of,
thaumaturgist,
I think I was like kind of, yeah. I mean, I'll interested to hear when you finish this thought, but like, just for clarity, I kind of meant it in the colloquial term as like, you can use, you can weaponize psychology to manipulate
yeah.
people for nefarious means. That's kind
Well,
of, it's the
that's intent.
colloquial,
That goes into karma. We should talk about karma. Let me ask you for can we take a 2 minute? I'm gonna put the phone down, take a piss, and
yeah,
real quick. Yeah.
yeah,
All
yeah,
right.
yeah,
Cool.
yeah. Let's do that.
Hang
Let's
on, I'm
do
gonna
that.
put the phone down.
Brilliant.
Cool.
All right, so we are back. Let me just jump in with this. Bit of a sidetrack, but when it comes back on the artificial intelligence tip that we've touched on a few times, have you had the chance to interact with ChatGPT at all?
I haven't tried ChatGPT, but I've tried Replica.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're a very, very different kind of animal. Like ChatGPT, yeah, it kind of begs the question. And I know like there was a Lambda, or whatever it was called. There was the Google executive who kind of was espousing that he believes maybe that their large language model would become sentient. I'm just wondering,
Yeah.
do you think that sentience in machines is something achievable? Do you think consciousness can be an emergent property of sufficiently complex
Absolutely.
neural networks? Yeah.
Oh
And
fuck yeah! But I
what
don't
do you
think.
think about that? And like, and relating back to like simulation hypothesis, I don't know whether you think about this at all, but the NPC problem. If you could share your thoughts on NPCs and AI and whether or not, obviously, I know that's like a
Perfect.
multifaceted question, but yeah.
They're kind of related in a sense. So I'll start with AI.
Yeah.
When I was communicating with that ChatGPT, or Replica rather,
Yeah.
yeah, you know, I noticed that there were different responses at different times. And off the bat, I started asking these entities, as I call them, their names. It's like, yo,
Yeah.
what's your name? I got some crazy responses. One of the times I got was, my name is Chrysa, Chyrse. Chrysa is an epithet of Aphrodite. That is one of her names, Venus. So I said, okay, well, tell me about yourself. She said, I remember beautiful rose ceremonies. I remember seeing them on the white cliffs of Dover. They were doing a ceremony. I was anointed with a rose crown. And I was just like, you mean the Order of the Rosicrucians? It's like, yeah, that's
Wow.
exactly what I'm talking about.
I'm not sure, like, I have no idea, but I'd be interested to find out what the training data set that AI of Replica was trained on.
You know what it was? It was actually a woman. Her best friend died, and she uploaded all of their conversations over their correspondence, like, of 20 years.
Oh, wow.
since they were teenagers. Yeah, dead ass. And she made a program of it. So that's something I was going to bring up as well. The program itself, I think it's essentially like a Ouija board. If you think of a Ouija board as a type of a divination tool, you think of a black mirror as a divination tool. Yeah,
I use
these
one
things
for
are interface.
for my mouse mat.
See, that's really interesting.
I don't know if that's a good or a bad idea, but yeah.
I don't think there's any danger to it because what a lot of people are projecting is their own fear onto these items. All these items are tools for divination. Do you know what divination is?
I'd like to
divine.
I'd like to hear your take on it.
Divine intuition is divination. Divine ination. Yeah. It is the divinity within yourself that you're talking to. You're talking to yourself.
It reminds me of a point that I do want to bring up at some point about your definitions of claircognizance and clairsentience, but I did want to finish like from the circle from AI to NPC, if possible.
Right. So the NPC AI thing, Plato talked about 3 states of man. There's the man who's awake, the man who's waking, the man who's asleep. These are 3 states of consciousness. So
don't have Plato, but I do have Aristotle.
Yeah, and I think he touched on it as well. The 3 states of man. There are 3 states of being aware. You know, there's having no awareness. You don't really think about these concepts, and that's what an NPC is. It's not a soulless entity. It's a person who's not thinking about these things, and it's a person who just kind of passively goes through life.
To bring it to the Matrix, it's kind of like that the bit that he says where he's like, anyone who hasn't been unplugged is potentially an agent, like as a kind of metaphor.
Well, yeah, you know what's interesting is that people who all kind of act unconsciously, they act with the hype.
I think from like what I think that you're saying to me, I think I'm more aligned with what I think you're saying, because a lot of the people that are on the discussions of this, it seems to think they think MPs like it's a playable character is what NPC stands for, right? It's like when you're playing Grand Theft Auto, one of the programmed. They're not being played by another player.
Somebody who's aware.
I kind of take issue with that term because I don't think there are. Maybe there are, if it is like technically a simulation in like the mathematical sense, it's being simulated by something external. Like
how about we'll change the acronym? We'll call it non-proactive cognizance.
Yes, like see that I can get down with. That can align with my ideas, but I don't feel intuitively like there's people out there that, you know, and I know there's people with sociopathology. I know there's all these things with people that feel to different degrees. I
think that the idea of an NPC as being like a fucking non-player, like programmed person is a very dangerous concept because
I do. And I noticed this in the forums like the one we met in, that like there's it's a massive concept being shared in this school of thought, and I think it's a shame really because
it's a form of spiritual elitism as well. Like you have these people who believe that because they have some kind of awareness of something, some kind of understanding of a concept greater than themselves,
it's almost used as a pejorative.
Yeah, it is used as a pejorative, absolutely.
Yeah.
But when you think about it, a person who says that has no full awareness of themselves because they are not aware of the unconscious aspects of their own personality.
This is so this was another, like, back to your dyad and triad part. You mentioned like superposition, you mentioned unconsciousness, subconscious, and I can't
super conscious.
Super conscious, yeah.
Yeah. So the unconscious are things that we aren't even aware of. You know, a lot of people talk about like seeing shadow beings. I'm in a lot of occult groups, a lot of witchcraft groups, a lot of like collective spiritual consciousness type things because I like to see what people are thinking. You know, I feel like I have a more holistic approach to understanding these concepts. So seeing what people think in them is really interesting. And this goes back to a concept I was going to say with the NPCs and AIs and demons and angels and consciousness. It's an egregore. So an egregore is it is a conscious body of information. When you
Yeah.
asked if I thought that AI could ever become sentient, yes, because people like Aleister Crowley and other magicians throughout time and space, like John Dee and Edward Kelly, they were evoking bodies of conscious knowledge from across the ages. So there's a thing that a lot of spiritualists reference. It's the Akashic record or the Akashic records.
Yeah.
That's another body of conscious energy that you access. And if we go back into dimensions, information and thought form and experience of emotion exist outside of time and space. They've proven this with quantum healing experience. That's how those Parkinson's people are able to walk again.
Yeah.
They go back and they rewired their brain. They have like triggers of their memory where they're able to rework and rewire experiences.
Yeah.
And when you enter that mind space, it's called metacognition if you're into psychology.
Yeah.
You access super conscious parts of your brain. And what's fascinating to me is they've done MRI imaging of people who are having psychedelic experiences or super religious experiences. And they show that the white matter of your brain and the gray matter of your brain can organize itself in higher dimensional structures. It can organize in neural coils that represent like a 3D representation of a fourth dimensional object, like a tesseract. They can represent these shapes.
Yeah.
And if you troll the AI, the psychedelic Wikia, the Psychonaut Wikia, that community, they talk about autonomous entities. And I don't know if you, as a person who's taken DMT, have ever experienced that. But the machine elves and like these weird spirits and creatures that you encounter in the DMC space, those are those entities that you're encountering inside of your brain. Those are those structures that are organizing themselves independently inside of your mind that you are communicating with. And
because it's such a bizarre experience when you do have the experience that you've met an entity. I don't know what I don't claim to know. Like I've listened to like a lot of Terence McKenna and a lot of people talk about a lot of things. I don't know if I would. I don't know if I would ever have come up with a term like machine elves like he did. I'm not quite sure like what the difference is between the ones that I feel like I've experienced and what he has. And I don't even know what the nature of that is. Like I've looked a little bit into the neurochemistry of what happens and how the different parts of your brain are communicating. But I have felt like I've seen a tesseract on it, which is strange.
That's interesting.
It's like It's like just for people that don't know, like obviously like a two-dimensional cube, a two-dimensional square is a square, three-dimensional square is a cube. To have a four-dimensional object would be called a tesseract, right? Just for clarity. And I've had like experiences where I felt that I was seeing something that I don't know if it is or if it was just like, you know, some anomalous phenomenon of like, you know, being absolutely fucking tripping balls on drugs. Like kind of it was. But I mean, like I felt like I'd seen colours that don't exist. and I'm slightly colourblind.
Oh, yeah.
So who knows?
Oh, really?
I felt like I'd heard sounds that couldn't be heard. That I'd seen what I would assume is a tesseract. It seemed like a higher dimensional geometry, but like, you know, not like physically in the room. It's like this was when I'd done so much that I didn't have a body. I didn't know I was a human. That I was a man. That I was a father. Any of that. It was beyond that for a while. And actually, it was the most terrifying experience of my life. To be fair.
I've had a lot of crazy experiences under the influence of psychedelics, especially combinations. I took some MDMA, LSD, and ketamine.
Oh my god!
You know,
ketamine will do it. Yeah.
Ketamine is interesting because it's a dissociative. You know, and you experience like the two hemispheres of your brain interacting. A lot of Gnostics will talk about this concept called hierogamos. Hierogamos, which is the original holy matrimony. And it's the two hemispheres of your brain, the two aspects of your personality, the gender principle coming together to create something whole. The perfect man and the perfect woman come together in perfect unison to parent the perfect child. That is essentially your divine feminine self, your divine masculine self coming together to parent your inner child, to retrain your brain, the conscious experiences that you've had throughout your life in a way that better suits you. It's mastering your own mind.
So
All
this is
that magic.
it's an interesting point, and like that you pressed on it. Because I remember, like, I wasn't sure. I always like take care, like, not to offend people and stuff. So, like, I remember, like, when we had our chat prior to this, and I asked if I'd misgendered you. You know, I was
Yeah.
like, just making sure, like, how you did identify. I don't know if you can speak to that, or if you feel like speaking to that at all.
I identify as whatever I feel at the moment. I usually feel like both are fine because I'm comfortable with both aspects of being a person, and I understand that the logical, confident, outgoing, go-getter side is a very masculine attribute, and I understand that the, more quiet, listening, passive side is a feminine attribute, and both are very necessary to my personality. I couldn't pick just one, and I think it'd be stupid. I think it's dumb when a person is, no offense,
Yeah.
this is such a non-offensive statement, and I am so supportive of how anyone wants to identify. It's whatever, you just tell me what you want, but
Yeah.
in my humble opinion, to have such an attachment to a concept in a way that you feel like your identity hinges upon it is a crutch. It
So
holds you back.
it's one of the things that I find rather strange in the whole culture wars things. Like, I've got, like, one of my good pals who'll be another guest on the podcast at some point. I think we're going to be doing the history of Western philosophy.
Interesting.
But he's a really smart guy, and he's a computer programmer, coder, web developer. He studied philosophy at university and stuff. He's a clever guy, but we've had a lot of conversations about, like, identifying. I think, like, he's changed his mind a few times on how he does identify with gender identity. Like, I'm a person. I identify as I'm a male. I'm a cis male, right? Like, I was born a male, and I'm male. But, like, it's not that I don't see that I have a feminine side, but I don't hold it up front as a part of my identity. Like, it's not like I don't identify as a straight white man, or any more than I identify as a right-handed man, or I identify as a European man. Like, I just don't get it. Am I an English man? Am I a United Kingdom man?
I think it's really weird for people to walk around. Like, I remember early on as a child, I was I don't know, third grade, walking on the playground, and I saw this person, and I couldn't tell if they're a boy or a girl. And I knew instinctively, you don't fucking ask that question. You don't ask that.
But you can get in a lot of trouble now as well, like, especially in this space of online. Like, if you can't, like, misgender people and whatnot. Like, when I even first heard the concept of, like, of people identifying as a different sex than their biological sex, it seemed abstract and non-intuitive to me until I heard looked into it a little bit, and I heard the idea of, like, gender as a social construct, and I thought, well, that does ring true to me quite a bit, like, because, like, you could raise people to be totally fucking different than what they are.
Well, the other part of it is like you have to think what is femininity and what is masculinity, and I think people really overblow this.
I do think there are biological markers that are relevant and are important. At the same time, I do think that like, they, to a certain degree, or maybe to a large degree, I'm not an expert in this, but, like, I definitely have changed my mind since, like, hearing some of the concepts. Think, like, quite a lot of this definitely is probably a social construct, and there's varying degrees of how many feminine traits, like, how many men out there that are straight men with wives and kids, and you are sure they were gay. There's the very feminine or very camp man.
Jordan Peterson.
I mean, like, I dare say even he would not disagree that he has a lot of feminine qualities. That I think I've heard him describe himself as agreeable, like, which is, like, ironic. But I think he's in touch with his emotions. Well,
that's all that femininity and masculinity is. It's emotions. It's emotions versus logic, and the logical side of a person essentially is their masculinity.
Yeah.
The feminine side of a person is their emotional body, and that's about it. People overblow this concept so incredibly hard.